The sound of Toby's laughter twisted into a shriek as two grown men yanked him off his bike, sending my heart plummeting. Asterisk asterisk on a lazy Sunday afternoon asterisk asterisk, when I expected to savor lemonade and cheers of "You've got this" with my son, chaos erupted instead. It shouldn't have come to this, but there they were, Greg and his nephew Darren, clad in neon vests as if they held the universe's de facto power to enforce arbitrary rules. Toby was blissfully pedaling near the green belt, gleeful in his newfound freedom from training wheels. Then, in a heartbeat, the celebration turned into something sinister. I bolted across the lawn, my phone slipping from my grip as Greg clutched my son's handlebar like he was detaining a criminal. Toby looked bewildered, words tumbling from his mouth. "Mom, they said I was trespassing." My fists clenched tightly. Would I witness them break my son's spirit right before my eyes? Just then, from the porch, my husband Tom emerged, walking with an unsettling calm. Asterisk asterisk, the kind of poise that gives you vertigo when you know fury simmers under the surface. Asterisk asterisk, he greeted the scene like a school principal confronted with chaos, almost unnaturally relaxed as he walked down the steps. "Let's get some context here," he said, stepping forward and locking eyes with the men who suddenly seemed deflated, as if the air had been sucked from their overblown egos. "What makes you think you can just pick up a child? Explain yourselves." Greg puffed up his chest, his bravado faltering. "This kid is violating HOA regulations. No bicycles on the greenbelt. It's our responsibility to maintain order." The absurdity sent a flicker of disbelief through me. Tom blinked slowly, then smiled, not the friendly kind, but a strategic smirk, as if he could outmaneuver them like expert chess players. "Authorized by who?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, dissecting the absurdity of their claims. Darren brandished a wrinkled paper, shaking it like a truce flag. "See, right here. We have to enforce safety protocols." Tom accepted the paper, read the lines with casual interest, and offered a brief chuckle. "This says no rollerblading during peak hours and doesn't mention bikes. And it certainly doesn't give you the authority to lay hands on a child." His words struck like daggers, cutting through their flimsy justification. My heart raced. I was ready to unleash the storms brewing in my chest when Tom shot me a glance, steady and calm, as if urging me to hold back. "Call the sheriff," he said, his voice low yet powerful. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Greg stammered, his bravado collapsing like a house of cards. "We don't need police involvement." "Oh, now we remember we're neighbors." Tom's tone dripped with sarcasm. I felt the air thrum with something electric as my pulse quickened, my anxiety channeled into determination. People began to gather around, drawn by the commotion. My shoulders loosened slightly, a sense of solidarity washing over me. "Get the sheriff," I repeated, but before I could dial, the crowd began to voice their outrage. One neighbor shouted, "Is that the same guy who tried to take my daughter's scooter last week?" Another added, "They threatened to fine me for my kid drawing on the sidewalk." It was true. Greg had built a fortress of petty grievances, and now it was crumbling as the community emerged from the silence. As their heads turned toward Tom, who stood protectively over Toby, a fire ignited within them all. "Anyone who's dealt with these two needs to speak up," Tom urged, eyes scanning the crowd, now murmuring with agreement. It broke through the tension like sunlight piercing through a thunderstorm. I swiftly dialed, feeling adrenaline surge through my veins, while I heard Greg's words falter, blending into a mess of excuses and half-hearted defenses. Tom's demeanor changed, shoulders squared and ready for battle. "Don't you dare walk away from this," Tom warned as he regained eye contact with Greg. The weight of his words hung in the air, challenge looming thick like a storm cloud. As the sheriff's sirens echoed in the distance, an unholy alliance formed between the neighbors and my husband, igniting a resolve I had never witnessed. Whatever facade the HOA had used up to this point was about to be shattered into a million pieces, pulled down by the strength of a single child standing on the edge of his bike. Asterisk asterisk, a child who just wanted to ride that asterisk asterisk. "What's this going to be about?" I asked as I tightened my grip on my phone, adrenaline coursing through me. Would this be a moment of reckoning, or was it merely a flash of courage before everything returned to the stifling quiet we had grown accustomed to? The sound of approaching sirens swelled, blending with the chaos of angry voices and murmurs of disbelief. The moment had arrived. I felt the electrifying pulse of a reckoning about to unfold. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone, recording the situation spiraling out of control. Tom's gaze remained fixed on Greg and Darren, who were clearly beginning to realize that their bravado could crumble like cookie dough under scrutiny from the very neighbors they had terrorized. I could see the fear flashing across Greg's face as the sheriff's vehicle came into view, a bright beacon of authority about to crash their little game. As the sheriff stepped out, I noticed the change in the air, a subtle shift as neighbors bristled with anticipation. Would this be the turning point? Would it be enough? I watched as the sheriff approached, a slight frown forming as he took in the scene. Two adults looming over a small child, a community festering with outrage behind them. "What happened here?" the sheriff asked, his eyes darting between Tom, Toby, and the two men in neon vests. Tom took a breath, his voice steady and sharp as glass. "These men," he said, gesturing towards Greg and Darren, "decided it was acceptable to physically remove my son from his bike because they claimed he was in violation of HOA rules. They actually attempted to intimidate a child. This is unacceptable." Toby stood there, clutching his bike tightly, wide-eyed but strong, absorbing every moment like a sponge. The weight of the world was on him, but there was a flicker of pride in his stance. He was standing his ground, and at this moment, so was I. The sheriff looked at Greg, whose alien bravado had begun to dissolve into bewildered confusion. "Is this true?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Suddenly, Greg's mouth flapped open as if words were a foreign language. Well, we were just enforcing community regulations." "Regulations?" The sheriff cut him off sharply, unimpressed. "You mean unwarranted intimidation against a child? There's no law preventing kids from riding on the green belt, especially on a simple bicycle." The crowd erupted in murmurs of disbelief, and the weight of communal support felt like a tidal wave crashing over Greg and Darren. Murmurs turned to shouts, with neighbors chiming in, recalling their horror stories of harassment and intimidation. It was cathartic, a swarm of voices rising from the shadows, breathing life into years of grievances. Darren, sensing the tide turning against them, fumbled to defend himself. "We were just following orders. The HOA said to maintain control over the community." "Control?" Tom's voice turned cold, slicing through Darren's excuse. "You mean terrorize families for simply living their lives? What authority did they give you to manhandle a child?" Greg shifted, realizing he was now on the losing side of a battle he never anticipated. "Look, it's in the code, okay? We're just doing what we were told," he almost whimpered. "What's the code worth if it allows you to cross lines of decency? To harm a child? Your authority only extends as far as people let it." Tom shot back, unwavering. The sheriff nodded, finally stepping in. "Gentlemen, you've crossed a line here. Let's get your side of the story on record. I'll be taking statements from all involved." As the sheriff began taking notes, I could feel the anger bubbling in me again. My phone still in hand, I captured the moment, knowing the community would need this footage. I glanced at Toby, his eyes riveted to the scene unfolding before him. "You all right, kiddo?" I murmured, kneeling beside him, my heart squeezing tight. He nodded, a flicker of bravery lighting up his face. Moments later, the sheriff turned back to all of us. "I'll need statements from the boy and all witnesses. We're going to get to the bottom of this, I promise." Suddenly, a figure stepped forward from the neighbor crowd, a woman in a visor, her voice ringing loud and clear. "They took my son's scooter last week under the same nonsense." Another neighbor chimed in, "And mine threatened to fine us when my daughter drew with sidewalk chalk." Testimonies flowed one after another, a cacophony of shared experiences and collective indignation washing over the scene. And with each story, the walls built by Greg and Darren began to crack further. Then, just as it seemed the tide was in our favor, Greg raised his hands, his voice cracking. You don't understand. We were acting on the HOA's authority. We were just. The sheriff interrupted, his imposing presence silencing any potential comeback. Cut the bravado. I don't want to hear any more nonsense about authority. What I'm concerned about is that a minor has been improperly handled and potentially subjected to assault. A hush fell over the crowd at those words, the implications settling heavily around us. Greg's bravado evaporated. We were only doing our jobs, he attempted again, this time trembling. Job or not, you don't touch a child, the sheriff shot back, and I could feel the fire within me blaze back to life as I replayed the moment that had ensued just minutes before. As I stepped back for a moment to breathe, I felt the surge of the unseen web surrounding us, an undeniable force drawing the community closer, united against the absurdity that had threatened our very peace. Unbeknownst to the HOA enforcers, they had just become the catalyst for a movement that was about to dismantle their reign. Just then, an unexpected sound filled the air, a distant rumble. It grew closer, the echo of engines and cheers. A procession of bicycles appeared around the corner, illuminated by the bright afternoon sun. Kids of all ages rode in formation, adorned with colorful streamers and makeshift signs, each proudly declaring their freedom. Asterisk, they were our children. The next generation of riders, a parade of unity. Asterisk. In that moment, a wave of clarity washed over me. This battle wasn't just about Toby or even the two men in neon vests. This was about reclaiming our right to a joyful, vibrant community, not controlled by bullies, but shared amongst friends and families. As if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the sheriff's expression softened. You could tell he was mirroring the swell of the crowd, an undercurrent of determination that would not easily be stifled. The parade of bikes slowed, gathering around us, exuberant energy spilling out like sunlight, children shouting, "Bikes for justice." And before I could register what was happening, Tom stepped forward, a knowing smile on his face as he motioned for the kids to join us. He turned to the sheriff, conviction threading through every word. This, right here, is what it's all about. This is community. And with that, I realized I was standing on the precipice of full-scale defiance, a perfect brew of chaos and courage ready to overflow. The sheriff looked back at Greg and Darren, now practically cowering in their fluorescent vests, and I knew this had become our moment. Standing together with my family, my neighbors, and my brave little superhero, I was ready to unleash a storm that would not only set the record straight but ensure our voices were heard above the petty yells of a misguided HOA. Today, we would fight for every child, every parent, and every joyful moment on a bike. Today, we would reclaim our community. The chorus of Bikes for Justice echoed through the air, a rallying cry that promised hope amid the chaos. I watched as my neighbor's children circled around us, wheels spinning, hearts racing with the enthusiasm only kids can muster. They were gleefully unaware of the seriousness at stake, but their joy radiated like a beacon cutting through a storm. Is this your idea of a joke? Greg finally spat, the tremor in his voice betraying the bravado he once wore like armor. You all can't just show up and dictate how things operate in this community. I could feel the tension thrum through the crowd as parents squared their shoulders, unified by the indignity of what had unfolded. That's just it, Greg, Tom replied, stepping closer, almost like a knight ready to challenge a cowardly dragon. You don't get to dictate anymore. We're done living in fear of your quasi-military tactics. The sheriff nodded, visibly impressed by Tom's cool confidence. It's time for you to understand what community really means, he said, aiming his words firmly at Greg and Darren. And that means the chain of authority works both ways. You serve these people, not the other way around. With the laughter of children echoing around me, I felt adrenaline shoot through my veins. It was our moment. It wasn't just about reclaiming freedom on bikes. It was about standing up against the creeping shadows of intimidation and control that threatened to break our spirits. As if summoned by the collective pulse of determination, Tanya, one of our neighbors and an attorney by trade, moved to the forefront. "Greg," she said, her voice calm but fierce, "you've been operating outside the law for too long. You've taken enforcement into your own hands, but we're not allowing that anymore." Toby, emboldened by the energy swirling like a storm, raised his tiny fist. "Yeah, no more clipboard cups." His words sent a ripple of laughter through the crowd, lightening the mood yet solidifying our shared resolve. I felt my heart swell, bursting with pride for my son. He was not just a little boy anymore. He was our warrior. Greg took a breath, scoffing in an attempt to regain control over the situation. "You think your kids on bikes can change anything? It's just a silly stunt." But the moment he spoke, something shifted. It was clear that the rally had awakened not just the spirit of our children, but the collective power we were gathering. The crowd began to chant again, louder this time. "Bikes for justice! Bikes for justice!" The sheriff, witnessing the transformation, raised his hands, a smile creeping onto his face. "You know what? Perhaps the HOA needs a reminder of who they're supposed to serve." As the chants crescendoed, a spark of realization ignited in me. This wasn't merely a protest anymore. It was a movement. And then it hit me. The children. They wanted to ride, but not just around the block. "Tom!" I shouted, trying to weave through the throngs of bicycles and kids. "What if we organize a bike ride to the HOA office? Show up as a community, filled with joy and passion. We can make a point without being aggressive." Tom's eyes lit up. "Yes, we'll turn it into an event, an organized ride that brings everyone together in solidarity." The crowd caught on to the idea, buzzing with excitement. "Let's do it," Tanya added, her legal mind already spinning plans around the logistics. "But we need everything documented. This ride isn't just for fun. It's to show that we refuse to be intimidated any longer." With renewed energy, we began to make plans. Neighbors formed groups, each brainstorming ideas on how to decorate their bikes and how to spread the word to gather as many supporters as we could. "Let's make signs," Toby suggested, quickly grabbing some markers and a piece of cardboard. He began sketching out a poster that read, "**, we ride for freedom, ***." As the preparations unfolded, a strange sensation coursed through me, the thrilling thrill of revolution, of reclaiming not just our rights but our community. I watched as parents began to speak to their kids about standing up for themselves and their friends. It was a lesson far larger than any I could have given them. As the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the park, a sense of urgency settled in. We needed to mobilize quickly. Just then, two figures emerged from the trees near the green belt, Greg and Darren, looking disheveled and panicked. Their neon vests somehow seemed even more ridiculous under the waning sunlight as they closed in on the gathering, trying to assert their fading authority. "What's going on here?" Greg barked, puffing up his chest in a last-ditch effort to command respect. "Just planning a peaceful bike ride," Tom replied coolly, his body language relaxing yet still steely in resolve. "One that symbolizes our community standing together." "Peaceful? Is that what you call it?" Darren snickered, raising an eyebrow. "Peaceful, as in lawyers and neighbors, united," Tanya chimed in, crossing her arms. "And you might want to check the legal ramifications of your little escapade before you misjudge the situation." Before they could respond, a group of children rode past, bells ringing, laughter echoing through the air as they showcased their excitement. It was contagious. In a moment of defiance, I leaned into my own resolve. "We're not backing down, and you can't stop us, Greg. We've mobilized all of our families, and we're going to the HOA. If you want to escalate, we're more than ready for you." I saw Greg's eyes widen, realizing he had underestimated us entirely. The tables had turned, and the momentum had shifted profoundly in our favor. With newfound confidence, I turned to the crowd. "Let's get ready to ride, everyone. Remember, it's about joy and unity, but also about letting our voices be heard." Excited cheers erupted as families began forming groups, securing decorations to bikes and rallying their kids. Greg and Darren exchanged glances, silently crumbling in the face of our collective spirit. The two of them stood frozen, shunned by the very families whose lives they had tried to control. It was as if the sun had set on their reign of terror, and the moment restored promise to our neighborhood. As the final touches were made to our bikes, I caught Tom's eye, a proud smile on his face. "We've turned this into something powerful, haven't we?" I said, feeling a surge of triumph. His lips curved into a grin, mirroring the butterflies of excitement swirling in my stomach. "Yes, and we're just getting started." And with that, the first few riders started to lead the charge down the green belt, laughter trailing behind them like a comet's tail, while we prepared for the ride that would mark the beginning of a new era, one where fear had no home, and every child was free to ride their bike without worry. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, a vivid reminder that the dawn of a new day in our community was on the horizon, and we were ready to chase it down. Asterisk asterisk, the movement had begun, and there was no turning back now. Asterisk asterisk. The shouts of "Bikes for Justice" pierced through the air, a fierce declaration that caught everyone's attention. It wasn't just a fight for bikes anymore. It had become a battle for our community's very spirit. As neighbors rallied together, anger simmering beneath the surface, a single thought struck me. Asterisk asterisk, this might be our only shot to make a difference. Asterisk asterisk. Greg's face went pale as the kids whirled around us, their laughter ringing like a clarion call for change. Gone was the bravado that had oozed from him just moments before. "You think this is a game?" he sneered, his bravado faltering. "You're just a bunch of kids." "Not just kids," I snapped back, stepping forward. "We're their parents, and we're done letting you bully our families." Darren, standing by his side, crossed his arms defensively, trying to muster a semblance of authority but looking more like a cornered animal now. "You don't have the right to dictate what we do. This is our community." The crowd stirred, a volley of voices rising amid the backyard chaos. "It's our community too, and we say no," shouted Tom, pointing an accusatory finger at them. Toby, just behind me, raised his tiny fist. "And we're not scared of you." His declaration sent a wave of cheer through the crowd that made Greg's expression darken further. Before anything else could unravel, the distant sound of engines grew louder. A procession of bicycles appeared down the street, children shouting and ringing bells, filled with innocence and joy. They were on their way to join the cause, unaware of the storm brewing in front of them, a wave of support that threatened to drown Greg and Darren's authority. As the children sped closer, I caught a glimpse of something remarkable. They were disappointed and angry too, having witnessed their friends being bullied, and they were here to stand with us. They didn't just ride their bikes, they rode with purpose. "Look at them," Greg said bitterly. "They're just kids who don't know what's happening." "No," I countered, my heart racing. "They know exactly what's happening. They're here to fight for each other." Just then, one child, Sarah, who had been bullied on her way home for her bright neon helmet that annoyed Greg and Darren, squealed with excitement as she joined the gathering. "We'll ride together," she shouted, pointing to her friends. "We're not afraid." Suddenly, something clicked in my mind. A spark ignited within me. What if we organize a huge bike rally? Show them that we won't be intimidated anymore? We could ride asterisk asterisk to the HOA meeting asterisk asterisk that would send a message. Tom's eyes lit up with understanding. "Yes, we can decorate our bikes, make signs, and ride together as one. This is our chance." The crowd buzzed with chatter, energy pulsing in sync as families began to plot their course. We needed to show Greg and Darren that our strength lay in unity. "How many do you think we can gather?" Tom asked, glancing at the growing crowd. "I don't know, but with all these kids joining us, I bet we can turn this into something unforgettable," I said, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Let's reach everyone. This is bigger than just us." As the excitement reached a fever pitch, I caught sight of Greg and Darren locking eyes, uncertainty draped over them like a dark veil. They were cornered, unsure of how to react to this unexpected uprising resonating throughout the neighborhood. Suddenly, Greg's bravado faltered further. "You think parading around on bikes will change anything? We'll just call the police." "Call them," I shot back. "You'll be calling in support for our cause. They'll see what you've done." The children, now caught in the fervor, joined in unison. "We ride for justice. We ride for freedom." Their voices rang out, and with each chant, I could feel the power of our movement building. Just as the momentum reached its peak, Darren stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You kids may think you're brave, but what happens when we report you?" he said. I grabbed my phone, feeling a surge of resolve surge through me. "You'll report us? Good luck with that. Not only is this event going to be a peaceful protest, but I'm going to document everything. We won't let you intimidate our community anymore." With that, I flipped my camera on, catching the explosion of support, the riders gathering around, their faces lit up with a mix of defiance and joy. Tom stepped forward, throwing an arm over my shoulders, and we exchanged a knowing glance, the two of us comprehending the power of the moment. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. And so it was, the dawn of our awakening, the day we would reclaim our neighborhood, not just for our children but for every family that yearned to live free from fear of intimidation. As voices filled the air, we mapped out our rally with care, determined to turn our frustration into a unified front. Tomorrow, we would ride, and we would ride fiercely, a movement igniting, and there would be no turning back as we charged towards the HOA, proclaiming that the tide was turning, and our community was ready to reclaim its voice. Asterisk, asterisk, the battle for justice had begun, and victory was within our reach. Asterisk, asterisk.